Donald Trump reached out to a lot of different people, and of course a lot of different people reached out to him to try to overthrow the results of the 2020 election. But we learned this week that there was another person involved. And to be fair, we actually already knew this person was involved because they publicly said they'd be willing to do this. But now we know a little bit more to that story. After media outlets started officially calling the 2020 election for Joe Biden, which of course was a day or two after actual election day, because we still had states doing their counting, making sure everything was correct. When the first media outlet called the election for Joe Biden, Donald Trump immediately made a frantic phone call to one person. And that person happens to be Republican Senator Ted Cruz. And it was reported by the Washington Post that Trump asked Cruz, could you argue this case in front of the Supreme Court? Cruz replied, sure, I'd be happy to. Of course, on the condition that the Supreme Court granted this a hearing. We knew that. Okay, that's not necessarily new. I think that's something a lot of people forgot, that we knew that following the 2020 election. And of course, that's not a crime. Let's be super clear about that. And the reason he would make that call to Ted Cruz is, of course, because Ted Cruz actually has experience with that. Ted Cruz worked on George W. Bush's legal team with the 2000 election that went to the Supreme Court. So yes, if you were going to make a call about going to the Supreme Court to contest election results, Ted Cruz is probably the guy you would want to call for that. And that is not illegal. This was not an attempt to overthrow the results of the election. It was just, hey, if we can get a hearing, could you do this for me? And Cruz said yes. That is, believe it or not, totally legal. The next part, however, a little bit more of that gray area, because that's not the end of it. Ted Cruz then formulated a plan based on these reports in the Senate to object, of course, as he did, to the Electoral College results from 6 different states. And what his plan was going to be, of course, this was prior to the insurrection that kind of changed things, was to basically ask for like a 10-day injunction so that they could get their crap together and file this legal challenge. But it would take so many voices in that body joining in with Ted Cruz. And because that didn't happen, they didn't have the votes, they weren't able to postpone it for 10 days. They didn't get their legal challenges out there to the Supreme Court. They lost. Now, again, not 100% illegal, but I'm not convinced it's 100% legal either. Because this wasn't based on any real evidence of fraud. It wasn't based on actual concerns about the election. It was Donald J. Trump had his feelings hurt because he didn't win. So Ted Cruz was like, I have a plan for the Senate. You know, I'll make this happen. Then we can file our legal challenge. They had no basis for the legal challenge, however. And that's why I say it's in that gray area, because you can't just file frivolous lawsuits knowing that you have no evidence to back it up. That is illegal. But Ted Cruz didn't get the chance to do it. So it's probably not illegal. So again, very difficult situation to assess. But let's not forget one thing. Had the insurrection not happened that day, I think Ted Cruz would have had the votes. I think Ted Cruz absolutely would have had those votes. So as horrible as the insurrection was, it may have actually drawn enough attention to what was happening that day to prevent something far worse from taking place. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you saw, don't forget to like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe to our Ring of Fire channel here.